Okay, this past weekend, Anthony Joshua took on Jermaine Franklin at the O2 Arena, with Anthony Joshua picking up the victory in a unanimous decision. And it was a pretty, I want to say, a pretty lackluster fight, considering the return of Anthony Joshua was built up so much. And a pretty safe fight, to be honest. I scored the fight, obviously. I think most people did in favour of Anthony Joshua. I can't really see any world where you give the fight to Jermaine Franklin, especially when you consider he didn't really, obviously, he had moments, Franklin, but wasn't anything big in the fight. I scored the fight, let me find it, 118 to 110 to Anthony Joshua. I think I gave Franklin I think 3 rounds. Not even 2 rounds. I think I might go back and maybe change it to 3, because I feel like Franklin did do some good stuff in the sort of mid to late rounds. But yeah, another victory though from Anthony Joshua, and he's back in the win column. But it wasn't, I think, the performance that people really wanted or maybe expected. Now, a lot of people are saying that, like we always hear, the doggy's gone from him. He's not aggressive enough, the killer instinct. But I'm going to say this will take time, right? Anthony Joshua fought Alexander Usyk twice, and both times, first time he got embarrassed, let's be real. Second time, he also got embarrassed, but not from a performance point of view, because of what happened afterwards. There's demons, I think, that's still in his head. The Ruiz fight will always be there for him, where I don't think he'll ever fully commit. You obviously saw Derek James be quite animated in the corner, which you don't normally see from him. Usually, you watch him with Spence or Charlo, he's quite a stoic character, but there he was fully letting everything go, and I think that's just him getting used to Anthony Joshua. I don't think this would be anything to worry about. I do think it will take time. Naturally, you don't ever see fighter trainer combos hitting off immediately in the first fight. Very rarely it happens. There are some examples. I mean, when Tyson Fury went with Sugar Hill, obviously the fight at Wilder, he was very aggressive straight away. But even in that fight, whilst Fury fought Wilder and was able to beat Wilder, and eventually obviously got him to stop the fight, it wasn't like an unbelievable performance from Fury. He was very messy in there, ruined a lot of his own work. There's a lot of times he couldn't really get shots off. So I do think that naturally with fighters, it takes a while to get used to his trainer, and he's going to go back to Texas, Anthony Joshua, and trainer. I think this is good. I think this would be I think this was a good rebuilding fight, and I think this is why I felt at the time it's a good opponent. You need a building fight, and I think this was the right one. I personally, the next fight, I'm going to say this, so I would like to see him, and Fury's always going to be talked about, but I would rather see him take another fight before he takes that one. I'd like to see him against Dillian Whyte, but if he's not going to fight Dillian Whyte, I would like to see him against the bigger heavyweight, because one thing to note, Anthony Joshua struggles a lot with smaller heavyweights. It's the big heavyweights where we rarely ever see him in with anyone who's, as big as him or taller. The only guys who would really give him that, I mean, Dominic Brazil was a big guy he fought, Semi Klitschko, but other than that, he doesn't fight anybody who's really his height. And I look at the likes of like Wilder or a Fury, they would be the guys who would be as big as him / bigger. So I would like to see that, because I just want to see how he does now against these type of guys. But regardless, I think Dillian Whyte would be the sensible next step. But I do think, I feel like I understand the critique of Anthony Joshua, people saying he's not that ruthless guy. But you got to understand, fighters, they go through moments in their career where something might happen that will almost make them rethink everything entirely. Kell Brook obviously was a solid fighter, very, very good. Was quick, sprite, and he was somebody who, you looked at me, thought he had a lot of heart about him, stepped in there with Golovkin, 160, and gave a hell of a performance. But what happened? He had the demons he obviously had his eye bust, and then when he fought Errol Spence, the demons came back. He injured his eye in the Golovkin fight, which forced his trainer to throw in the towel, and then you have the operation. I think they replaced it with titanium. He then fights Errol Spence. Same thing happens to the other eye, and I don't know if it was as bad or worse, but what I know happening is the same thing happened again. But this time, instead of his corner, Dominic Ingle, stopping the fight, Kell Brook took the knee in his hometown in Bramall Lane. And that, I think that Golovkin fight really ruined Kell Brook, because since then he's not been able to kick on. He beat Amir Khan in his last fight, even though I do think he's making a comeback. But it shows you that fighters, sometimes these things can change them. But with Anthony Joshua, I do think that it's good for him to get a victory like this. I thought his jab was working very, very nice. Again, it was like just 7 out of 10 for Anthony Joshua. It wasn't like an amazing fight. I don't think he was ever in trouble, really. Frank had moments, but it wasn't anything crazy. There was a moment at the end of the fight where they started almost scrapping with each other, but it's one of them. It's just a fight. We've seen it happen quite a few times with fighters. And with Anthony Joshua, I do wonder now. So I think Dylan White will be the fight that they make, but I don't know. I just wonder what will be the next step, really, because I do think he has he lost the killer instinct, perhaps, but then I also do believe Anthony Joshua, as many fighters, is a confidence fighter. I think you need to see him knock a man out cold, and then if he gets the knockout against somebody and he still fights in that timid way, then maybe there could be something to that. But we all know he's not the same guy that was fighting Dylan White, fighting Klitschko. You know, it happens. You get knocked out and knocked down 4 times on your American debut against a guy, Andy Ruiz, who was seen as a short, fat, not someone who you should have been losing to. It's going to mess you up, and I think the demons are obviously still there, but I do think getting back in the win column is most important. And even though people were critical during the fight, I think now nobody's really talking about how he's... I think the criticism hasn't been that loud, is my point. I don't think people have been making a huge deal of this. With Andy Ruiz, he's talked about how he didn't speak to anybody, he was just inside and all this kind of stuff. So I think now I do believe it's good that he's back in the win column. And like I said, the demons are still there. And I don't think that they will go away until Anthony Joshua overcomes them. Because that's the only way you do it. I don't think it's like... You know, sometimes you have certain things with fighters where they'll almost be afraid of a certain thing. I remember there's a story, I think it was Kamaru Usman explaining this, when he was fighting out of the... what was his gym's name now? I think it was Sanford MMA, I think was his gym, initially. And his coach, Henry Huff, told him Kamaru Usman is a wrestler, isn't used to boxing, striking, doing anything, and he was afraid of getting hit, and he got dropped, I think, one time by Michael Johnson. And he was talking about how his coach said to him to just go into the fire and embrace it rather than being so afraid of it. And he said once that happened, he overcame it, and he was able then to walk into range, wasn't afraid to get hit. And you've seen in his career what's happened. He's been in wars, and he's come out most of the time on the good side of it. So I do think that it's something with Anthony Joshua where he needs to almost, I think, get hit and show that he can take it. And then once that happens, that's where I think you see the confidence grow. I can see him getting hit by a Wilder. This isn't, I don't mean like a flush shot, but if Wilder was just to hit him with a somewhat decent right hand and Anthony Joshua were to take it, I could see him, if he fought him, I could see him growing from that. People obviously put Anthony Joshua in that elite group of heavyweights, the likes of Wilder, Fury, Usyk, and he's in that group. But the problem is, he's also, compared to the 3, very mentally, he isn't as, I don't think he's as confident as a Wilder. And I don't think he is as, I don't know what would the word be, he's not as well versed in the sweet science as the like of a Usyk or a Fury. When those guys are in certain scenarios in a boxing room, they know what to do because of how long they've been doing it. You got to think, Anthony Joshua started boxing at 18, so there are still things I feel he's always trying to learn, and I think that's why he always seems like he's a little bit of a novice still. And he shouldn't be in his career now, 2-time heavyweight champion, Olympic gold medalist, but it's just, fighters grow in different ways. And I think, like I said, him being in the gym with a Spence and a Charlo will help him, because these guys have been in it for a long time, and let's be honest, like I said, achieved more in the sport. Errol Spence is seen as one of the best in the world, and in my opinion is the best heavyweight in the world, welterweight in the world, and Jermell Charlo's undisputed. So I think there's so much that you can learn from those guys, and in a gym like that, it's not like a massive gym where cameras are there every time. I think it's good. But yeah, For Franklin, though, I think he did very well in the fight. To his credit, though, took a shot. Like I said, he was 29. It surprised me how young he was, and I think Joshua did better against Franklin than Dylan White did. Dylan White wasn't really happy with his performance, Joshua, afterwards, saying that he felt that with Joshua in the fight, he felt like he was just lackluster, didn't do anything much. And I do think with Dylan White, made a point which I thought was interesting, how he doesn't care if he wins or loses, but he'll always go for it. And that's one thing I do agree with him on. He will always go for it, Dylan White. And that's the difference, I think, there with Dylan White, where he will go for it and put on the show. And I do think with Anthony Joshua, they're not the best of friends. So I do wonder, his last few opponents, you go through it. He fought Franklin. There was buzz heat in the fight, but nothing really big. There wasn't really much in the Usyk fight, obviously. They're both respectful of each other. In the Pulev fight, it's just a mandatory defense, nothing to it. And Ruiz was a lovely guy. There was no bite in any of these fights. So maybe a Dylan White could be the fight to bring him out of it. Or maybe a Jarrell Miller, because he's called him out today as well. And we know those two were supposed to fight before he fought Ruiz. And I do think that with Jarrell Miller, there is a little bit of heat there still with those two. So, yeah, I'm interested to see where he does go. But I just think it's good to have him in the win. For heavyweight boxing, I think it was better. Obviously, he performs like that against a Wilder or a Fury, he'll lose. But I think ultimately, you can't, I think, take this as too much than what it is, just a building fight. Don't get me wrong. If he fights like this 3 or 4 more times, then maybe you can cast more judgments from that. But like I think Derek James said, they're just getting used to each other. And I think the more he works with James, the more he goes in the gym. And I think it's good, like I said, that he won this fight, because I do think him and James is an excellent pairing. I do think you'll see more from them I think you'll see him naturally become more aggressive, should he, I think, go down that path that Derek James' fighters do have. I think also having that American style is going to benefit him massively. But yeah, and decent performance from Joshua, a bit lackluster, but interesting to see where he does go from here, though, because I do believe he can still be world champion. I don't know, Usyk is a tough one, but I think he can beat Wilder or Fury. I do favour those two against him. I used to favour him against Wilder, but I think after what I've been seeing recently, he just needs to be a bit more aggressive in there, Joshua, and I do think you'll see a lot more from him against the Wilder. But if he fights like he does, very safe, just at the end of a jab against Wilder, I do think Wilder will eventually catch him, because Joshua is not slick. He's not someone you can't. No heavyweight is slick. Let's be real. Even Usyk, as slick and as elusive as he is, you can still touch him and hurt him. I feel it's just about setting the traps. But I think Wilder will catch him or something. So this is why I think it's about being more aggressive. And I think naturally, continue with Derek James. I do think this will come in time. Also, like I said, working with the likes of Spence and people like that, I do think it will gradually come for Anthony Joshua. Maybe it wasn't the result of the performance that, it was the result people wanted, but maybe it wasn't the performance that people wanted. He didn't get the knockout, but to me, you lose 2 fights, and like I said, first fight, he got outclassed and he got really kind of beat up at points. Second fight, he did alright, but it still wasn't enough. You just need to get in the win column and get your confidence back up. And I think in sport in general, confidence is the main thing. And I think the more you see it, I feel like you may see him be slightly more aggressive as the fights come on. Like I said, demons are still there. We clearly see this, but it was just about, again, a lot of people criticise Anthony Joshua, saying that he hasn't got the heart, he maybe hasn't got the killer instinct anymore. I always say, is he the same guy that he was before? Maybe not, but I would say, I think these are things that I personally think could come back. I just think it's about how he's handled, and again, it's to me, it's not a desire thing. People say Anthony Joshua hasn't got any heart, but I saw him get dropped against Ruiz 4 times, and every single time he came back up. So I think he's there, but I just think he needs somebody to bring it out of him a bit more. And I think if he fights as Dylan White or Miller, that's where you may see him be a bit more aggressive. Because say what you want, I do think he believes he's much better than those two, and I think that may translate in him maybe being more aggressive in these fights and be on the front foot. I would have liked to see him go to the body a bit more. He did land a couple of solid body shots, but didn't really go there as much, and I would have liked to see that a bit more. He's a jab, and he he also never really committed, I think, to a really solid right hand or a solid uppercut. I felt like Franklin was doing a lot of clinching, which in the 12th round, he looked a little bit unsteady, Franklin, but there was never a point where I felt like his legs were wobbled or that he was completely going. So I think with Joshua, what you need is, I just feel like just commit a bit more to the left hooks, the uppercuts. I feel digging the body a bit more as well. I think Joshua, for a guy of his size and strength, I've always said he doesn't use his size nearly enough. This guy probably could bully the majority of heavyweights, and I include Tyson Fury in that because whilst Fury is strong, look at the way Joshua's built. People talk about the muscles being a factor, but I do think that in some cases it can help you, and I think that's one. And I also think one thing I would say, this fight also did show that Joshua is capable of going 12 at that specific weight. I forget what was the weight. I do remember this was a career heaviest for Anthony Joshua in the fight. I feel in the fight he looked a lot more. It's weird. He looked big, but I felt bulking like he usually has done. 255.4 pounds was what his weight was, and before that, his career's highest was 254 against Carlos Takam. So again, he's shown he's capable of going all 12 at being these bigger sizes because a lot of people felt like he would gas out. It's just more about the pace of the fight. I think if the pace of the fight is against him, regardless of if he's heavier or even if he's a lighter weight, he's going to gas out. Maybe obviously he's more likely to gas out at heavier weights than he is if he's a bit lighter, but to me, just stay bigger and just use what you got, in my opinion. But yeah, good though. He gets the win. I'd like to see Dillian Whyte next, and I think it'd be interesting to see where he goes from here now. And it's just good that he got the win. I think you can see he's smiling more. His confidence is there, and I think, like I said, I feel like in boxing, more than any sport, confidence is what you need, especially when you're in Anthony Joshua's position where everybody's talking about you and criticizing you. I think you need to. I think you just get the win and rebuild, and you keep going forward. And yeah, interesting to see, like I said, what he does next. But just my thoughts on Joshua's win against Franklin. I thought Franklin actually performed very well. I think he can take a lot from this fight. Him against the Ruiz, actually, I think could be an interesting fight for Franklin next. He's not a bad fighter, Franklin. For what a lot of people said, obviously he only lost that fight to Dillian Whyte, in which I thought he actually won. So yeah, it's interesting to see how he does at 29 as well. He's still very young heavyweight, so, well, not very young, but he's reasonably coming into his prime as a heavyweight. So interesting to see what he does next. But yeah, just my thoughts on Joshua Franklin, and yeah, until next time.